We're going to welcome on stage the rest of the rabble who are going to come on and sing their hearts out, write their poems on their sleeves, and fiddle. Okay? So please give a big round of applause to welcome back on stage our lovely reader, Jilliana. Hey, Jilliana! More! Come on! Come on!
Get a few more. Get any more? No.
Any more?
Okay. This is another one that I've just written, and it's called Parisian Ladies of the Night. When I first began my life as a brocante dealer between London and Paris, are you listening?
No.
In 1977, I would déballe at Marché Montreuil at 6:30 a.m. in all weathers, even in the misty, fine rain. Today, in 2018, I asked myself how I could have been so stupid and gauche, spreading my good quality English collectible stock on the ground, watching and waiting for punters. What a hard life, sur les trottoirs de Paris. But oh, such fun, without a care in my crazy Mickey Mouse world. One early, damp, grey morning, a white van, driven by a French postcard dealer called Alexandre, was backing out of his spot in the market and didn't see my rubbish on the wet ground covered with plastic as protection against the drizzle, and thus ran over and flattened my precious collectible vintage English biscuit tins. When I shouted at him, pointing out what he'd done, ruining my stock, he just laughed, shrugged his shoulders and drove off. If they weren't postcards, in his way of thinking, it was merde pour la poubelle. I never forgot this insolent phallocratic behaviour and the incident later ignoring this bombastic dealer when I saw him running around at the ephemera and postcard fairs. I was later told by dealers in the know that he specialised in erotica, but I didn't care as I was not interested in doing business with André Dupois, even though years later I ventured gingerly into that themed area through happenstance. The decades passed and my dealing days ended, turning my stock and private collection into a themed commercial nostalgia photo library called Retrograph Archive. After all, why sell an image when you can license reproduction rights and get to keep the original image? Have your cake and eat it too. One of my themes was erotica, having bought several alluring, sexy dressed sepia ladies of the night postcards, along with American 40s era Betty Page black and white posed bondage photographs. The Parisian ladies were erotic in the 20s, with garters, some wearing negligés, and others topless, but never bottomless, being scantily dressed at all times. Their faces became so familiar, it was as if I was having a relationship with these women. None of them looked like sluts. I made sure I handpicked them for their attractive smiles and sensual bodies. They all looked like they were enjoying themselves, sitting on beds, lounging around on decorative, distinctly designed Art Deco oval cushions. Some wore dark school uniforms with white blouses but no panties, carrying books. Some showed their provocative garters with laddered stockings, while others were doing something surreal like ironing or telephoning. My favourite lacy petticoat-clad lady was holding a whip across her knees, sitting demurely, waiting patiently for her victim. Back in London, I was contacted by the formal, bespectacled picture researcher Emily, working for Wordsworth Editions, who were publishing a series of out-of-print vintage erotic books. They needed a good selection of sepia glimpse of stocking with something shocking ladies for their enticing sepia vintage-looking paperback covers. So Emily and I would scrutinize my ladies, but not showing poops or nipples at any cost. Emily was so matter-of-fact with her professional research that we could have been looking at household product consumer advertising. No raised eyebrows for this spinster, who was efficient at her job, of course. No amusement or humour the day she came round to source, not to source. As I was going to Paris to hunt for more images for Retchgraph, my vintage nostalgia archive, it was suggested that I browse at Les Larmes de Hérault at 58 Rue Amelot in the 11th district to find my ladies. How was I to know that the shop gallery was owned by my arch enemy, Alexandre? However, the gallery was thankfully managed by his hard po-faced, black-haired, fringed, very Parisienne, scarlet, bow-shaped lipped Louise Brooks look-alike wife. She and I had been introduced at the paper fair when she invited me to come to their gallery, enticing me with the promise of hundreds of sepia ladies, visuals in all shapes and sizes. I arrived with the sole intention of finding my ladies. Nothing more, nothing less. She escorted me to a large central table that occupied most of the ground floor, but oddly she stood pouting behind a circular small reception desk, watching and waiting. For what? For who? I was soon to find out. An erotic clock hung on the wall with female black stocking legs with a red garter moving with every minute in different positions. The stark white walls were adorned with black and white modern art erotica framed prints in black, so the effect was quite striking. Black and white, white and black, with a hint of provocative scarlet here and there. I excitedly sat down with 4 shoeboxes of vintage postcards. I had all afternoon. I'd reserved the time. As I flicked through the sepia images, head down, concentrating, the doorbell rang and a man entered, moving around me silently as there was not much room to swing a cat. I didn't look up but kept on focusing on my delectable ladies. Then the doorbell rang again and again. Men were walking around, looking at the walls silently but purposefully before disappearing into the basement where the rare, explicit, sadomasochistic photographs were on display for a limited time. Out of curiosity, I had to venture down the stairs. Ooh la la, what an education. Photos of lesbians fondling each other, penetration, Japanese bondage, threesomes, blowjobs, handjobs, S&M, whips and leather bondage, all very kinky and so French, from Alexandre's famous private collection, some rare ones coming from the French actor Michel Simon's famous erotic collection. Alexandre had published several photographic books, having found his niche, and the demand was without any competition. Prints, books, limited edition, reproductions of explicit photographs, and who knows what other services were on sale in his gallery. I was very aware I was out of my comfort zone, but on a focused mission, not, however, thinking of missionary positions, but thinking of book jackets, and a proposed poster book of 30 Parisian ladies, each one of whom I would have to name. I looked at their silent faces, thinking of frivolous names like Mimi, Fifi, Lulu, Minou, Miu Miu, as if calling to them, traveling through time to the world beyond. That was during the late 80s. Today, 20 years on, The gallery cum shop is still open, but I am no longer looking for these smiling, enticing ladies frozen in time, nor venturing into the underbelly of the shop to be educated. And the next one is about an evening I spent with a clochard when I first came to Paris and probably didn't know any better. It's called Ringo the Clochard. I arrived in Paris from Mexico in 1977. How and why is another story, but I used to eat for 30 old French francs, including rough local wine on the Boule Mich, Saint-Michel, the student district of Paris. I would go in an old traditional restaurant with long benches and communal tables looking out on the Boulevard Saint-Germain. I usually chatted to the students sitting next to me, but this night was different. My eating neighbours were clochards. There were two of them. One was older and already drunk with a big bushy beard, and the other had long hippie hair and wore flared denims and a mangy leather jacket. He introduced himself as Ringo, king of Place Mouffetard, which was a well-known square in the Fifth. Proudly, he produced a postcard sent from California, addressed to Ringo, Place Mouffetard, Paris 5e. Amazing, he got it. Then the older man caused havoc by sliding off his perch onto the floor. Drunk as a coot and ranting, Ringo tried to pacify his friend, but to no avail. The special branch of the police was called, and the man carried off to hospital for delousing and a night in the cell. The night was young, and so hippie Ringo suggested I walk with him slowly to Place Mouffetard, having a beer on the way, at my expense, bien sûr. We crossed the boulevard and walked on slowly, taking shortcuts when Ringo was approached by very friendly police officers. I quickly worked it out that he was a police informer out on the streets. After cadging a cigarette or two from the police, we continued on, passing more tramps, clustered together, eating cans of sardines by a fountain. The first thing I noticed was the men had scabs on their legs. Ringo explained this was because clochards never had hot meals. Everyone knew him and had all the time in the world to gossip about life on the streets. A few beers later, still at my expense, we finally reached the Place, still in the 5th District. On the way, he told me that an American tourist had paid for his ticket to join him in San Diego. When he showed me the photo in his wallet of an attractive blonde who had invited him, I realized Ringo was in fact an educated hippie dropout who had chosen life on the streets. At the evening's destination were groups of tramps clustered in different parts of the square. On seeing an obvious green gringo, one of the men approached me to chat me up. Ringo pounced on him and saying, "Hands off, she's my guest." Word went round fast. The man nodded respectfully and moved away. After half an hour in the square, I got bored. I said adieu to Ringo and walked back to the reality of my new life in Montparnasse. I never saw Ringo again. Have we got time for one more? One little one?
Yes, go on, yeah, one more, yeah.
Okay, this is the last one, very short. It's called Tito Tum in Paris. Annie, I have to say, Annie was the owner of a hotel I was living in on the Rue Moulin Vert in Alésia. I paid her rent and she would take me out for dinner. Good arrangement. Annie and myself were at Jim Haynes' weekly soiree one Sunday evening in Paris when I noticed a well-dressed Oriental lady in the room who eventually gravitated to my landlady Annie and invited us back to hers for a nightcap. Unsuspectingly, we followed her into the night. Her place was only 2 streets away from Jim's in the quiet, middle-class 14th district of Montparnasse. We approached the building and almost collapsed when we saw giant painted phalluses all over the metal shutters covering the windows in the street. In silence, she raised the heavy shutters and in we went. Into what? Another world. Into a very large room like an amphitheatre, going down to the lower floor with benches all around. There was in the middle a giant phallic totem pole from floor to ceiling, a bit like the ones carved in Canada, hand-carved in Canada. Annie and I could hardly contain ourselves as our hostess disappeared in silence to make the tea. We realized she was trying to recruit Annie for some sort of sect, not me, thank God. We gulped our tea and beat a hasty retreat. Outside, in the silence of the night, we howled the place down, crossing our legs in the street. I had never laughed for so long and so loud in my life. We never saw the Oriental Chanel-esque dressed lady again, and I forgot to ask Jim who she was.
Oh.